Hey guys, yeah, my name's Andy N. I'm over in the Manchester area of the UK. Yeah, I've been looking forward to it for a couple of weeks now. So I'm gonna do some start off some poetry tonight anyway, straight away. So now, since David's already talked about it, I'm gonna do a few poems from my current poetry book, Changing Carriages at Birmingham New Street. Now, this book itself is about an affair. Yeah, well, I know. It's about an imaginary affair between two imaginary characters that knew each other as children, and then when they reconnected as adults, they both were in unhappy marriages, and one thing led to another, and started off good, and well, it doesn't finish very good. But so I'm going to read a few poems on that. This is the title poem, and it's an important poem in the book. This one because it shows you the amount of movement that happens in this. Because in it, as much as it is about the two characters, it's talking a lot about the areas they were up and down in all the time, up and down England, and it shows how each town or city they're in, how everything affects it. So this is Changing Carriages at Birmingham New Street. During those early days, of course, we had to keep it quiet. Whether I was stopping at the Malmaison in Leeds, and you lied about a new client in Holmesfirth, which went on nearly all night. And how about that time at Birmingham New Street, when the train broke down halfway back from Euston, and we ended up sitting in separate carriages when your husband had to come to get you? Do you remember Warwick Castle, Sarah? And Man United for that Champions League match, where we could only chat for 5 minutes at the beer counter during half time to prevent anybody from becoming suspicious? And the return leg 2 weeks later in Madrid, which I had to cancel at the last minute when one of my daughters went down ill, just before I was due to leave, and I spent the entire night in hospital. Caught in our guilt in ways we didn't recognise, from an almost nervous beginning, when we were reconnecting as friends, unlocking our hearts like suitcases, lock after lock after lock, sitting on steps outside Manchester Piccadilly Station every time we met, sweeping everything else aside. Under an imaginary table, open-mouthed and sorries, each time we kissed to start with. Okay, the next poem from the book is moving the narrative along slightly, and this is the next two actually all set around the Brighton coast down in England, and I love it down there, so that's why I tend to know this area really well. So it's the next two. Well, the first one for that is from this section is waiting for the last bus at Seaford, and Seaford's a beautiful area. Beating our teeth in the wind, our relationship began, stringing lies to everybody in a diary-like fashion, so nobody knew what was going on, no matter where we were or wasn't, as the case sometimes turned out to be. Do you remember that first night, Sarah, when you texted me on the train to Brighton, saying you weren't really sure about this, only to turn up when I finished my coffee and was reaching for my coat to walk down to the seafront? And that second night, when we got the bus down to Seaford, and we wandered without direction, trying to find the white chalk cliffs, and you would hold my hand saying, "We don't know what we're getting into." I didn't love you then, ducking in and out the fog, speaking softly to reassure you. I knew where we were going, all the way back to the bus stop, when in reality I was as lost as you. I didn't have the heart to tell you then, although I had been there before. I certainly wasn't an expert and just smiled. What are we going to do? The bus doesn't turn up or has failed early. Framing my phone as an amber beacon, exposing both our shakings and images instead of fragmented attempts of humour until our bus eventually turned up, tracing the creases of disillusion, pulling us together like cars just before crashing without realising. Moving on. Next one's just up the road from Seaford in a wonderful area called Hove. And this features in quite a good cameo a bit about the British TV series in the 70s called Bagpuss. And my friend Anne's here tonight. I'm sure I know Anne loves Bagpuss, so I'll dedicate this one to her. So this is homage to Bagpuss in Hove. Was it the third or fourth night, Sarah? During that month we lived in Hove. My agent paid for us both to move there temporary. That second summer we were together. And we stumbled onto that singer playing alone beside the coastline at start of dusk. Do you remember asking him, Sarah, pausing between songs, can either of us play a auto harp or mandolin at the edge of the beach, cup of hot chocolate barely keeping his aged fingers warm? I'd grown up watching it like you, although I couldn't begin to name any of the songs. He played one after the other, rather than names of Bagpuss's friends, from Professor Yaffle to the Mice and the Mouth Organ, to Gabriel the Toad and Madeline. I see the singer's face even now, harmonica in his mouth, playing a melody, the song of the flea, and Charlie Mouse weaving, before eventually finishing with the bonking of nowhere, opening up the curtain to unexpected love. You didn't get it. I should have seen that in the ash-coloured light, finding the nostalgia too strange, pausing for a few seconds, as if you were listening to something else, before hurrying on as before, underlining the difference between us both, that I only realised after you had gone. The last piece I'm going to read from this book is some time further along, and it gives a big hint of the tragedy which happened. This is called 3 Visits to Paris Within 10 Years. The first time, do you remember, Sarah? It rained all weekend, all the way from the airport in Paris, right up to Saint Laurent on our honeymoon. And we spent most of the afternoon, well, into the evening in the Latin Quarter, listening to a jazz band which you couldn't stand. 5 years later, and 3 after contracting diabetes, do you remember, Sarah, having to almost mesmerise me in guilt to get me on that plane, exhausted after the collapse of another adaptation of my book, and nearly losing Michelle during the birth of their first child 3 weeks earlier. 5 years after, 2 after you had died, the guilt follows me out of the airport, a cheap stopover to Milan, at the edge of the Seine, a blank interior, days gone past, as much as words that could still be said. 5 years after, 2 after you had gone, of untold stories stood there, in peripheral sadness with the rain, lost in the brilliance of memory, an effigy and emotion, disappeared into the past, echoing the silence of your goodbye to my memory. Okay, I'm going to read out. I'm going to read a bit of flash fiction now. This is a serious one. I've got some surreal ones coming up later. This one, I know David likes hearing about Manchester music. This is set in a club in Manchester called the Colton Club. So this is Time. That was it. He told himself, standing in the toilets after he'd finished his set. He wasn't going to sing again. It wasn't as if he'd been rubbish or the material substandard. At least 2 of the songs he had played at Glastonbury were the same ones he performed there the first time he played there, and other songs he sung regularly over the years. The stark truth he told himself looking up at his reflection in the mirror was he should have given this up years before, especially after the young lad had just been on stage before him and promptly blew him away, leaving him looking like an old has-been. The lad was all of 18 and 19, barely old enough to shave or get on stage. He paused, realising he was the same age as he'd been when he sang on stage at the Colton Club for the first time. He could have become a doctor like his younger brother, looking back at it, who last he heard was expecting his 3rd child and talking with Dwarfley Edge, or he could have pursued a trade like his father, he'd never really got along with anyway, but was working a decent trade all his life. He could have done either what they did. Lost in thought. He knew, as soon as he got on stage that first time, he knew he was never going to stop. And before he knew it, 20 years had passed. The kid wasn't that good, he told himself, as he opened up the back door minutes later. But yet he once had. And he could become good, maybe. But He knew it was Sunday, as I did, looking at every side of the stage. He took a deep breath and looked up at the stars. The rain started as he began to walk to the bus stop. The bus went past him seconds later without stopping. He decided to keep on walking. He woke up on the park bench the morning after as the sun began to rise. He closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of the park. The birds chirping, the children laughing, the wind rustling through the leaves. It was music to his ears, and only then did he begin to cry. Right, okay, I'm going to do one more miserable piece before we go to something a bit lighter. A couple of you know already, like I got my first novel out last year, Birth, and I'm 3/4 away from the sequel at the moment. It should be out to start next year now. Okay? We'll be starting a new day job. I'm just not going to get a chance to wrap it up this year. So, but this is an alternative part of the second book, Death, because I got asked recently in a workshop to write a scene in the book from a different aspect, because the book itself is about death, but it's all about love. This extract is about hate. So it introduces all the same characters, but it does it in a hate way. So this is footnote. Going to your own funeral, I have to say, was a surreal process or play. I no longer got a role in right when they brought my body in a coffin. First of all, behind the carriers was my wife, Tara, who stood there weeping into a crumpled handkerchief, and then turned around to both our daughters, Melissa and Charlie, who both stood there looking clearly disinterested in the whole bloody process. Melissa, the eldest of the two girls, by about 15 minutes, stared at her phone, occasionally glancing up with a little boredom. Charlie, the younger one, kicked at the floor, shuffling her weight from one foot to the other, clearly disinterested. They'd always been Tara's daughters, never mine, only getting worse the more our marriage began to disintegrate. The brief eulogy was kind but impersonal, a list of achievements. I barely scratched the surface of who it was. I stood there, looking at them, watching Bobby, my brother, comforted arm around our mother, and then walked over to Tara and she cried into his arms. And I thought for a moment he was going to kiss her. Did Tara care for him? Did the girls ever have any feelings with him masking it? And I feared the role my blood for her playing their lives now was gone. Even in death, it was just a footnote. Right, I'm going to do something more gentler now because I've depressed you for about 10 minutes. So I am known a bit around the Manchester area for doing occasional bits of surreal flash fiction. So this one's called Mannequin and Chips. Yeah, you thought you were drunk too. Well, I'd had a few beers with Banky and Danny over at the Crown Anchor, but I wasn't drunk. Well, not like the previous Saturday when the three of us got that drunk. I passed out at the bus stop, missed the last bus home, and didn't wake up till 7 a.m. the following morning when a policeman tapped me on the shoulder saying, "Shouldn't you be sleeping this off at home, son?" That was a heck of a night, I have got to say, which made the following Saturday night a massive anticlimax when Danny arrived and told us he couldn't stop out all night and he was taking his sister's kid to go and watch Oldham Athletic early the next morning. Sportsmart Mikey also decided to call it quits early, so I decided to go get a load of chips and have them waiting for the bus. And guess what? I was half through eating them when I heard a tap at the window of the local Primark round the back of me. Some poor bastard's working late tonight, I thought to myself, turning around to smile at him, only to see one of the bloody mannequins had come to life. Yeah, I couldn't believe it too. For a few seconds, I thought I was dreaming, and she knocked on the window, almost like trying to wake me up. "I'm sorry," she began politely. "You're a mannequin." I slurred my words. "I don't normally eat chips," she carried on, "but the cleaner's not left a spare sandwiches hand for me tonight. Starving." I looked at my watch. "I've got 15 minutes spare," I answered, stunned. "Do you want me to go and get your bag?" Please, she smiled. How about curry and chips? She smiled even more. 5 minutes later, she took them off me at the staff entrance with a huge smile. It made the papers on Monday when security couldn't believe who had written on the main till in curry sauce. Thanks, Andy. Last piece now. This is a bus invasion on the 85. By the time the 85 bus arrived near the Colton Club, 30 minutes late, both Andy and Amanda both started to really overheat. This is the last time I let you drag me all the way down here, Amanda said. It's not my fault, Andy responded, looking at the timetable. He says it should have been here nearly 30 minutes ago. Do you want to go and get a taxi? Amanda said. Andy was about to answer, but then saw the bus come round the corner and breathed softly. Thank God. The boy started swearing, whilst two children got off the other side of the bus. See that? 2 Martians. His words dangled out. What were you drinking at the Colton before? Amanda snapped. Nothing. Andy tried reasoning and grabbed one of the Martian's hands. Amanda pulled him off. Leave the child alone. Andy yelled. That's no child. That's a Martian. The bus driver then cut in. For God's sake, are you getting on or off? I'm running that late as it is. Andy tried reasoning him, but Amanda dragged him on. I've had enough. We've got a long enough journey home. You can't. Andy spluttered and made a final, desperate attempt to grab the Martian. It pushed him away and pulled out a laser gun. After they'd killed everybody, one of the Martians transformed into the bus driver. At the next stop, they picked up 8 more Martians and carried on for the rest of the route. That's me done, guys and girls. I've enjoyed it tonight. Take care.